Sandra Palo was born on January 22, 1981 in Getafe, Spain. She lived with her parents, Maria and Francisco Palo, as well as her sister Jessica and her 9-year-old brother Ismael. Sandra's childhood was somewhat traumatic, as she suffered from severe meningitis and spent some time in the hospital. When she was 9 years old, she and her sister were in a car with their father and were involved in a serious accident. Both girls were thrown through the windshield. Their father was unharmed, her sister sustained several injuries, and Sandra hit her forehead badly. As a result, she suffered a skull fracture and grew up with a mild intellectual disability and a scar on her left eyebrow. Because of this condition, she was bullied at school, which often made her studies difficult. By May 16, 2003, Sandra Palo was 22 years old. She left home to meet her boyfriend Antonio and a friend named Alberto. They were going to celebrate the feast of San Isidro and planned to return home early because the next morning her brother had his first communion and needed to go to church early. Late at night, on May 17th, Sandra, her boyfriend, and his friend decided to go home. First, they walked Antonio to his house, which was closer, and then Sandra and Alberto decided to take the bus. It is important to note that both young men accompanying her also had intellectual disabilities, and she had met them at a center she attended. While waiting, Sandra called her mother and said they had been waiting a long time for the bus. It was around 2:30 a.m. During the call, her mother was very upset because they had agreed Sandra would return earlier due to her brother's communion that morning. Since no more buses were running, Sandra and her friend decided to walk home. At that moment, a car stopped in front of them and 4 young men inside threatened them with a knife, forcing the pair into the vehicle and driving toward Getafe. After a few minutes, they forced Sandra's friend out of the car and threatened to kill him if he told anyone anything, then drove away with Sandra. Out of fear and due to his intellectual disability, Alberto decided not to notify the police. Instead, he sent a message to Sandra's mother saying that Sandra had boarded a bus and was on her way home, and that if she did not arrive, Maria should inform him. The message was strange, but Sandra's mother did not suspect anything serious. She was worried but believed her daughter would arrive soon. However, the next morning, Sandra did not return home. Maria assumed her daughter had stayed at a friend's house to avoid being scolded for coming home late. Maria and Francisco Palo attended their younger son's first communion but were very worried about Sandra. When they returned home, they received a call from the police informing them that earlier that morning a truck driver had found the body of a young woman in Leganés with facial features resembling Sandra's. Her parents later identified the body, confirming it was indeed their daughter. The forensic examination revealed that Sandra had been brutally murdered, burned, and sexually assaulted. She had numerous injuries on her body, tire marks, spinal fractures, and severe burns over most of her body. The entire community was outraged and demanded that the authorities find those responsible. Sandra's friend Alberto was one of the first suspects. Although he struggled to clearly explain his version of events, no one believed he was capable of committing something so horrific. Fortunately, the police investigation did not take long to identify the 4 young men involved. The perpetrators felt no remorse and had even told several friends about what they had done. The first to be arrested was a 17-year-old named Ramon Santiago Jimenez, who had recently been accused of theft along with his girlfriend. Under police pressure, Ramon revealed the identities of his accomplices, who were arrested a few days later. The other three were Jose Ramon Manzano, 17, Rafael Garcia Fernandez, 14, and Francisco Javier, 18, who was practically the only adult in the group. All of them were members of a gang called El Chupeta and had committed an enormous number of crimes, reportedly around 1,000. The four accomplices had been arrested hundreds of times, but since they were minors, none of them had been held in custody for more than a few hours. An example of the brutality of their past crimes is that Rafael already had a conviction for shooting two people with a shotgun while they were simply walking down an avenue. The oldest of the perpetrators, Francisco, claimed he had nothing to do with Sandra's murder, but the others stated that he had organized the crime and persuaded them to commit it. According to the killer's statements, on the night of May 17th, they went out intending to commit a crime, as they usually did. They saw Sandra and Alberto walking down the street. At that moment, Francisco said he wanted to have sexual relations with her, and the group decided to abduct her. They stopped in front of them and forced them into the car. Shortly afterward, they made Alberto get out and threatened to harm both of them if he went to the police. They then took Sandra to a vacant lot near a factory. Sandra begged them to let her go, explaining that she had to attend her brother's first communion the next morning, but they mocked her and ignored her pleas. They stripped her naked and raped her outside the car, allegedly to avoid dirtying the vehicle. Afterward, they discussed what to do to get rid of her. In the end, the young men decided they had to kill her. Francisco got into the car, and while two of the others held Sandra against a wall, he drove into her several times, breaking both of her legs. Then, while Sandra was lying on the ground in agony, the four perpetrators got back into the car, and Francisco decided to run her over 10 times with the front wheels. The girl remained unconscious on the ground, and they assumed she was dead. They then drove to a gas station to buy gasoline to burn her body. The young men left her there alone, unconcerned that someone might see her. In a way, they seemed to feel completely safe, leaving all the evidence behind because they believed they would face no consequences. When they returned to the scene, Sandra was still unconscious but was able to move one of her hands. Realizing she was still alive, they nevertheless decided to pour gasoline over her and set her on fire. Ultimately, this became the cause of her death, as she had been clinging to life despite the brutal abuse inflicted on her by her attackers. The trial of Sandra's killers was divided into two proceedings, one for the three minors who were tried in October 2003, and another for Francisco, who was tried as an adult in January 2005. Because Ramon Santiago Jimenez, Jose Ramon Monzano, and Rafael Garcia Fernandez were minors, their trial was not covered by the media, although their sentences were made public. Despite committing a horrific crime, they were protected under juvenile law and were charged with unlawful detention, rape, and murder. Ramon and Jose Ramon were sentenced to 8 years in a juvenile detention center and 5 years of probation. Rafael was sentenced to 4 years in detention and 3 years of probation. Rafael's defense argued that he had not participated in the rape, which is why he received a lighter sentence than the other two. The three young men claimed they had acted under the influence and manipulation of the oldest member of the group, Francisco Javier. His trial was partially covered by the press. He was charged with the same crimes as his accomplices, but with aggravating circumstances of malice and extreme cruelty. The proceedings revealed the brutality of the crime and Francisco's lack of remorse as he described the events with striking calmness. In his defense, he claimed he had been under the influence of illegal substances when he decided to commit the crime. He also denied being responsible for the killing, stating that another boy had been driving the car when Sandra was run over. Nevertheless, the court sentenced him to 64 years in prison, although at that time the maximum effective sentence in Spain was 30 years. Currently, the maximum penalty in Spain is life imprisonment with the possibility of parole. For many years, and even today, there has been active debate in Spain regarding prison legislation. The law strongly emphasizes the social reintegration of offenders, and in many cases, inmates receive benefits that result in them serving less time than originally imposed. After Sandra's murder, her family collected signatures to submit a petition to the authorities demanding harsher penalties for minors, as 3 of the perpetrators received very light sentences. Additionally, 2 of them were only a few months away from turning 18 at the time of the crime, which many considered extremely unfair. For years, Maria has given interviews to Spanish media advocating for reforms to the criminal code regarding juvenile sentencing. The family organized several demonstrations calling for reform and also founded an organization called the Sandra Palo Association. One of the most serious issues is that if a 16 or 17-year-old offender is sentenced to 5 years, they serve the entire term in a juvenile facility, even if they reach adulthood during that time. As a result, they may leave the center at 21 or 22 years old or even older. Many consider this unfair, as a juvenile facility cannot be compared to an adult prison. It also means that adult offenders remain in the same centers as 14, 15, or 16-year-olds who can be easily manipulated. Instead of helping with reintegration into society, this environment may contribute to turning them into repeat offenders. Furthermore, after serving their sentence, the conviction is essentially erased from their record because they were minors at the time of the crime. The family's request is that young offenders tried in juvenile court should be transferred to adult prisons once they reach legal adulthood. They also call for harsher penalties for crimes such as murder and rape, even when committed by minors. Maria points to the 3 minors involved in her daughter's case as examples, stating that instead of properly reintegrating into society, they continued committing crimes. According to records, after serving only 4 years, Rafael remained involved in various criminal groups, committing burglaries and crimes against public safety. Since 2011, he has been wanted for car theft and has returned to prison at least twice. In 2021, he was arrested for fraud but was released after his sister posted bail of €650. Ramon Santiago was released at the age of 24, but shortly afterward he was repeatedly arrested again for criminal conspiracy, car theft, violent offenses, and shoplifting. Jose Ramon also continued committing crimes related to violent robberies and returned to prison several times. Reports indicate that he displayed antisocial behavior and even assaulted his own mother. Despite all this, the 3 men remain free. Thank you for watching this video all the way to the end. I encourage you to subscribe to my YouTube channel and share your thoughts about this story in the comments. Thanks for watching, and this isn't goodbye.